So it turns out that being creative and loving to play with fabric and papers and leaves and branches and all of those things is the solution to permanent mental and physical weight loss. My mom said the hardest thing about raising me was that I was constantly leaving a trail of paper and strings and flowers and fabric around the house. I was constantly creating, and I loved being able to make something out of all of these materials. I am a professional quilter, and I want to tell you my story on how becoming a professional quilter, I want to tell you my story of how being a professional quilter helped me to now become a weight loss coach for helping women lose that mental and physical weight that just keeps carrying around. My name is Dara Thomason, and I have lost over 50 pounds and kept it off without counting a single calorie or tracking a step for the last 4 years. And I want to share with you my journey and how I've been helping so many other women have the same results. So, some might say that I was a professional dieter. And I want to share with you my story, and I want to know if that resonates with you as well. So, when I was a little girl, I loved my body. I loved dancing and moving, and I was super proud of my body. I was super proud of who I was. And it wasn't until I was about 12 years old, and I remember we were shopping, and I was at a Levi's store, and I tried on these Levi's, and I thought, oh, they're kind of snug in my thighs. And so I had this thought, I must have big thighs. And of course, I've heard my aunt and my mom and my cousins talk about a minute on the hips is a lifetime on the, sorry, a minute on the lips is a lifetime on the hips. And my mom constantly doing exercise videos and trying to put her jeans on and zip it up, and other women. And so I thought, oh my goodness, is this my life now? Is this who I'm becoming? And I started to feel very insecure about my body. Now, I was really short at that age. And in fact, I was one of the shortest in my class, but I had these really big feet. And it just started feeling awkward about my body was different. And of course, all of our insecurities at that age it seems like a death sentence. We want to fit in. We don't want to stand out. And then when I got to grade 9, I grew about 9 or 10 inches in 1 year. And of course, growing that much in that short of time drew a lot of attention to my body. And it made me really uncomfortable. And my friends would make comments about how skinny I was and how I didn't have cellulite and all these things. And I didn't want to have attention drawn to me and my body. And I felt really uncomfortable. And of course, being in junior high and high school, that is the time of insecurities, and you don't really want that attention drawn to you. And I really struggled with that. And I went off to university, and again, lots of comments about my body, how skinny I was and how tall I was and how all of that. And it just made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And then in my early 20s, my parents got divorced. And it was a really confusing time for me because I never knew that they even had any marital problems. And so the idea of having a committed relationship really scared me. And one of the subconscious ways that I dealt with that was I just started putting weight on. And I would gain this weight, and I remember buying dresses thinking, what's happening with this dress size? Like, why am I wearing a size 16? Why am I wearing a size 18? That's not me. I'm this skinny tall girl. And I was really disconnected to my body because I had so many fears about commitment and my body and drawing attention. And so I kept that weight on. I busied myself with being a school teacher and working in the community and in my church. And I really wasn't connected to this body. And I remember when I was 27, I had a really good friend, and she took me aside and she said, why are you holding on this weight? Why are you this extra weight? And I never really fully realized what weight I was because I was so in denial. And so much of the work that I do now is really being able to go into our brain. Now imagine an iceberg. So 5% is what we see in our brain, and 95% is under the water. It's all of these subconscious thoughts that are in there. But if we don't have the tools or the courage to dive in and see what's going on, we never really discover what's going on. And so after that discussion, I started opening up my heart and allowing myself to really connect to the body that I had. And I didn't want to have that body. I wanted to run again. I wanted to feel confident. I wanted to actually start living the life that I wanted. And I was able to get some help. I was able to go to counseling and work on some tools. And that got me to a place where I started to run again, and I started to not buffer with food, and I didn't overeat at every meal. And so I was able to now feel a lot more comfortable in my body. Now, fast forward a little while, and I was able to get married and have children. And then those old diet stories came back of, oh, when you have babies, you have your body changes and you don't have that same weight. And I lived in fear of gaining weight, but of course, I started gaining weight and I started having those unhealthy relationships with food again. And I got myself really tied into my role as a wife, my role as a mother, and I started getting into that trap of that diet. I gotta lose this weight. I've gotta do that, or else I won't feel good about myself. And so went to the library, joined Weight Watchers, all the things, and did some crazy diets, always in the hopes that I would be good enough in my body. And so so I struggled for years, and I would work really hard and I would lose the weight, and I've had 5 babies, and after my 5th baby, it was the hardest for me to lose the weight. Now, my youngest baby, my youngest, when he was 2 years old, I had this crazy audacious dream of being a professional quilter. And I remember thinking, how can I be a professional quilter? I have 5 kids. At that time, I lived in central Alberta, Canada, and it was just so crazy. And so I started quilting for people, and I started teaching at a quilt shop, and I started to write patterns and really develop my skill as a free motion quilting expert. And I did that. My kids would go to bed at night, and I started quilting. I would quilt from about 10 at night till about 2 in the morning. And I did that 5 days a week for about 5 years. And I loved quilting for people, and I thought it was a great outlet for me. And it helped me to work on my dream of becoming a professional quilter. My husband got transferred, and we moved to the island, and my youngest son went to kindergarten. It was the first time that I had been in my home by myself without any kids. I could count on 2 hands how many times I was in my house by myself without kids. And I didn't really even know who I was. I had done my quilting at night when the kids were sleeping, but to have the day to myself, and I wasn't happy with the move. Things weren't that great. And I just started to put on the weight, and I started blaming perimenopause, and I started blaming the move and all of these things. And I was so unhappy. And I remember one day I was scrolling on my phone, just really frustrated and feeling like I don't even know what my purpose is anymore. Who am I if I don't have little kids hanging around with me during the day? And I was scrolling, and I found a friend, well, actually someone who I admired as a quilt designer, and she was going to life coach school training. And she said, I need a guinea pig. Who wants to, I have a tool that will help you solve any problem. And at that point, I was so desperate. I thought, I'm going to try her out. And so I reached out to her, and she gave me 6 coaching calls and taught me these skills and tools. And after that, I started using them. I started getting international quilting jobs. I traveled all across Canada and the US teaching quilting. I started getting book deals, and I published 3 books. And as I was living my dream and I was practicing what I was learning, I started to lose physical weight as well. And people were watching me starting to shrink before their eyes, and they asked me, how are you losing this weight? And I thought, well, it's with my brain. And people were so intrigued. And so I started to share with my fellow quilters the tools and steps that I use to lose the weight myself. And as that momentum started to grow, and as I could see that they were getting the results, I made a decision. And the decision was, I'm gonna be a weight loss coach for quilters, both mental and physical. And I haven't looked back. And so I want to just share with you a few pillars about why being creative and curious is the best news for losing that mental and physical weight. The first thing that you have to understand is that weight loss science is actually super simple. And when you can base your the way that you eat on science, just very basic balancing hormones, that's what's going to give you that transformation. And then you learn how to be creative and curious about what foods work best for you. You start being creative about what foods work best for you and your unique body. I'm 6 feet tall. I'm 49 years old. What works for me is not going to be the same for someone who is 5'2". And so when you can start becoming empowered and curious and start using that science to help you, you can do anything. And then I teach you how to I recognize the emotions that you have, so you're no longer needing to buffer, you're no longer needing to scroll or eat or overspend. And then I teach you how to stop blaming others and start taking responsibility for all of the things that you're feeling in your own life. And the last thing we do is we work on building self-confidence. That is how I've lost the weight. That's how I keep the weight off, because it's not a one and done. We're all living and having these experiences. And as you continue to work on your brain and actually understand how neurology works and how flexible our brain is, you can make that change for yourself.